And Slater, thank you so much for joining us today to take our questions about the PPP.
Excellent. So thank you very much for having me here today. Craig reached out to me last week looking for some help, knowing that several of your constituents were in positions where they needed some help with the Paycheck Protection Program. And having worked with Campaign for Southern Equality for a number of years, I was really excited about the opportunity. So my objective today is to empower y'all with the information that you need to be able to apply for the PPP program if it's something that makes sense for you in your organization. A little bit about my background. So I have a CPA firm here in Asheville, North Carolina. We specialize in working with nonprofit organizations. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is really going to be through that lens of nonprofit organizations. But I see that we do have a couple of folks here that are not nonprofits that might have some questions. And in anticipation of that, I did a little bit of research. So hopefully I can help guide y'all into the right direction so that y'all can move forward confidently with these applications. So a lot of what we're talking about, or what our objective is, the Paycheck Protection Program. This was a new loan program that was a component of the CARES Act that was passed on March 27th, which seems like an eons ago, but in fact was less than 3 weeks ago. And in that time, the CARES Act brought with it a lot of different things that can help businesses, nonprofit organizations, and individuals that are being that are impacted by COVID-19. If we were talking about the entire CARES Act, we could spend more than just an hour. So we're really focusing on that Paycheck Protection Program because that's kind of the hot issue now. And what's driving a lot of it is that it's a pool of money that dwindles each day as more and more people apply. And so that's why we wanted to focus on that component of the CARES Act today. There is another component of the CARES Act that sometimes gets confused with the PPP. And I want to throw a slide up here that will compare and contrast the two different loan programs that are currently out there as part of the CARES Act. And hopefully what y'all can see on the screen now is a comparison between what are 3 loan programs, but we're actually going to ignore the mid-size because I think we're all below 500 employees. So we're really just going to look at these 2 loan programs, the PPP and then the EIDL. And the only reason I'm bringing up the EIDL is so that y'all don't get confused about which loan program you're trying to apply for, what you're moving forward with. What really makes the PPP program so enticing for organizations is really the loan forgiveness part. So the EIDL is more of a traditional loan. So you apply for it, it carries with it interest, it gets paid back over a period of time. The PPP is more of a short-term loan program that's designed to help employers and self-employed people to keep their workforce intact. So it's a program that's designed to start out as a loan, but then if you meet certain criteria, it can actually be forgiven within the 8-week period of which it starts. There's a look back period there, or a look forward period. So that's what really makes it so enticing, is that if you do get the loan awarded to you, you meet those criteria of keeping your workforce intact, the whole thing can be forgivable 8 weeks from the date of the loan application. So that's what really makes it really exciting, and why so many people are asking and wanting to apply for that program. So this just compares and contrasts those 2 loan programs. I just want to make sure that no one's getting confused between those 2. So the next thing that I'd like to do is actually bring up the application itself. And I think by doing that, we can take a look at it and maybe dispel some of the anxiety that people might feel about the application process. So hopefully what y'all can see now is another PDF document that the title of it's the Paycheck Protection Program Borrower Application Form. So what I'm going to do is walk you through this. The first part of the application process is just demographic information. So you're going to check whether you're sole proprietor, partnership, 501c3 nonprofit, list your legal name, your address, your EIN, demographic information that should be easily obtained for y'all. The second part of this application is what's the loan amount going to be? And we're going to dive into this a little bit later, but I just want you to see where this shows up in the application. And then you'd be selecting what is it that you're needing help with. This isn't going to influence your application one way or another, but I think it's helpful for the folks that are looking at your application to know, is this just for payroll, lease, utilities, that sort of thing. The second part, and this is the part that does trip up some nonprofit organizations, is the applicant ownership. So the powers that be, the Small Business Administration, they want to get some idea behind who is it that's applying, who owns these different businesses, in particular, who owns more than 20%. Well, we know that nonprofit organizations don't have owners. That's just who they are. So the guidance that we've received from the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits is that in this space, if you're a nonprofit, you're just going to put in a nonprofit organization. Banks, SBA should understand that and be able to move forward with your application. Now, the next part of this application consists of a series of yes/no questions. And again, these yes/nos are really designed to kind of filter people out that have some underlying issues that wouldn't allow them to move forward with the application, and being debarred from doing business with the federal department or any agency. These are really kind of the things we're trying to keep out, folks that might have had maybe a criminal issue in the past dealing with the SBA. And so these are yes/no questions. They're pretty straightforward. I think most all people in our group here would be able to check yes. The second page of the application really consists of certifications and authorizations. So you should understand that when you're submitting your application, that you're providing information that is accurate to the best of your ability. You're not fraudulently making up numbers, and you're not trying to defraud the government. So their response to that is to get the signer of the application to initial certain certifications. And so each of these should be fairly straightforward for y'all just reading it. The one that I do want to call attention to is this second one here. The idea behind the PPP is to help businesses in this time of crisis. And so the people that are applying really need to have some sort of economic uncertainty that warrants the need for these funds. And so this is the part where I think everyone that's connected today probably does feel that, or else you wouldn't have joined the webinar. But that's the part that really kind of gets to the meat and potatoes of this entire application. What uncertainty do you have? You don't have to justify yourself. You don't have to present a case to your bank of why you need the loan. You just need to say, yes, I feel like I need this for my business in order to survive the next few months. So these are just going to consist of certifications where you're going to initial here and there. So the next.
Can I interrupt for just a second?
Yes.
On that certification, that is not saying that your nonprofit has no income during this time, right? Or your business. You are allowed to have some income coming in. And like you said, you aren't going to have to prove it later that, oh, second quarter was really bad for us. All that's required is this certification, right? Giving your word that the pandemic is going to affect your nonprofit or your business financially.
Right. That's correct. That's correct. That they're not asking for full financial statements where you're showing that your nonprofit went from $15,000 per month of revenue and now you're down to zero. you're not having to prove any of that. Nor are they going to look at your balance sheet and say, well, you've got $125,000 in the bank, you don't really need this loan. So it's not necessarily a proof that you have to make in order to certify that. It's really just you have been negatively impacted and you're certifying that you feel like you've been negatively impacted.
So would like to flag that we have a hand raised from Mike.
Yeah.
Hey, sorry about the connection problems earlier on. We're having ongoing internet problems here, so thanks for bearing with me.
Sure.
We have two businesses, both S corps. Mine is doing okay, but business is significantly down to like maybe 20% of normal income. So I get that I'm eligible for this. My partner's business, also an S corp, his income level has been fluctuating to the degree that for the last couple of months, in fact, the whole of the first quarter of the year, he hasn't paid payroll. He's just taken expense reimbursements and hasn't made payroll since January. I'm guessing that he's not eligible because on the 15th of February he wasn't paying payroll, but I'd like to clarify that one way or the other, if that's okay.
Yeah, so my understanding, and I don't have a lot of experience with S corps, so I won't be able to give you any kind of definitive answer, but it would be my understanding that the data that banks are looking for is what was your payroll for 2019. In fact, I'm going to pull up an application here in a minute that we can look through from a bank that corroborates that. We're really looking at a 2019 period. And even though he wasn't paying a salary, he was still the owner of that S corp on February 15th. So,
okay, thank you.
I think that you should be fine there. Yeah. So with that, let's, I said that we were going to come back to this calculation piece. I think it makes sense for me next to share this loan application that I got from, this is from First Citizens Bank, and I reached out to them to get a copy of what they're sending to their clients. And I understand not everyone is excited about spreadsheets, and I'm going to try not to bog you down in this, but this is kind of the flow chart of how the program works and how these numbers are calculated. So what's important to kind of illustrate for y'all is that they break it out into the three buckets. So what we're calling step one really applies to your nonprofit organizations, your businesses with payroll, those types of businesses. And so this is where we would use this part of the sheet to calculate your loan amount. For those of you that are independent contractors, I believe, was that King, you mentioned that you were a self-employed musician. This is probably where you would put in your independent contractor amount. So just pulling your 1099s that you might have received from the Biltmore estate. Or if you had a more robust Schedule C, you would qualify as a sole proprietor. And this is where you would just pull the amount from your 1040 Schedule C line 31 and just put that amount right there. And then that's going to calculate the loan amount for you.
Thank you. That is really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And so what I'll do is just kind of show you how this works. So, if your payroll was $120,000 for 2019, you just put that number in there. And again, you can pull this from your 941. If you're a nonprofit, you're going to file 941s each quarter. So you just add all four of those up, 120,000. And we see based on that, you're going to have a maximum loan amount of $25,000. So again, it's 2.5 months, 2.5 times your average monthly payroll, which is 120 divided by 12, 10,000. So this would be then your loan amount that we would put into that figure of the application form. Again, box 1 was just the average times 2.5 gives you the 2.5, $25,000. And then your number of employees. So how many people did you have on staff for that period? So That's kind of, sometimes it's helpful to walk through numbers and see, you know, how that calculates and how it gets, how that shakes out. So hopefully that was helpful. And so the next few things that I'm just going to kind of touch on are some of the deliverables, if we will, that we're going to send as part of the package at the conclusion of this webinar. Let me see, I need to switch back over to my PDF. Let's see if we can do that. All right, so again, here's that loan application. So this is where we would put the $10,000 and $2,500, too many zeros. So that then becomes your loan amount, and you probably had maybe 4 employees at 120,000, so 30,000 per employee. So you just put your amounts in there, and the same methodology that you use to calculate this this loan amount will be the same methodology that you're going to use for the possible forgiveness that you have at the end of the loan period. So I talked a little bit about that loan period. So we're looking at the 8-week period from the date that your loan got funded. So let's say you successfully completed your application, you gave it to your bank, and you got funded on April 30th. Then for all of May and June would be the period where you would need to maintain your payroll at that $10,000 per month level. And then if you successfully do that, then it all becomes forgiven, and the $25,000 turns into a grant for your organization.
And Slater, if this was my nonprofit, I will need to provide some documentation that I spent that money on payroll, right?
Exactly. And so one of the things I was gonna bring up was so I shared with y'all the Excel file that's used to do the calculations. I also have the application from First Citizens Bank, and here hopefully y'all can see that they actually give a list of the types of information that they would need in order to fund your loan. And so that shows up here in payroll documentation. Also asks, you know, we're going to need to see some government ID to make sure you are who you say you are. And so this is, again, I should probably stress this, that every bank is going to be slightly different in the form that they ask for information, but it should be fairly consistent in the types of things that you're going to need. And so the payroll reports, if you're using Intuit, for example, they can provide you with a report that shows your payroll for that period. Your 941s, 1099s, those types of things. You know, so you should expect to be asked for those items, and I would encourage you to prepare those in advance to make things a little bit easier. So again, Craig, I think your question was, so what kind of documentation will I need to keep during the period of the loan? So it's going to, again, if you're running payroll through ADP or Paychecks, there'll be a report that they can provide you that shows the amount of payroll that you paid. I've seen where they would ask for, if you're using the PPP to pay rent, they might ask for copies of checks where you paid your landlord for your rent expenses. Same thing with your utilities. They might ask for canceled checks, or at least some other invoice from Verizon, for example, if that was your utility. I have seen some recommendations from online where for sole proprietors, what might be helpful to just put another safeguard in place for being able to document your use of these loan funds is to go so far as to create a separate checking account where the loan funds go into that bank account, and then you're only writing checks out of that account for those qualified expenses. So it'll just make it a little bit easier to document your forgiveness when you get to the end of that 8-week period.
Could you go back to the application for a second?
Yes.
So I see the maximum loan amount for this hypothetical nonprofit is $25,000.
Mhm.
Now, what if I crunch the numbers and I say, you know what? We're working from home. Utilities are not going to be an issue. We don't have a lease or mortgage. All we need is 8 weeks of payroll for our employees, which would be $20,000. We don't need that extra 5,000, and actually we won't be able to document that we spent it, and we would have to pay that $5,000 back. So we don't have to request the maximum loan amount. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think I understand your question, and I do want to kind of clarify one point. So the calculation that goes into this application doesn't include rent or utilities. It doesn't include any of those other things. Now you can include it in terms of your forgiveness, but just for your straight calculation of what you can borrow, it only includes the payroll component, again, the paycheck protection. We have gotten questions before of, this was actually a conversation I just had before this call. Our calculation is 163,000. This is a larger nonprofit. We don't need 163,000. We want to actually take less than that. The feedback they were getting from their bank, we're not set up to do amounts less than that. We have to follow this formula, and 163,000 is the amount that you need to take. It should be noted that if for whatever reason you got to the end of that 8-week period and you were only able to document $120,000 of qualified expenses, that $43,000 you could either keep as a loan for a 2-year period, or you could immediately pay it back without a prepayment penalty. And so if we're talking about our nonprofit organizations, the advice that I'm giving to those folks is that the loan only has a 1% interest rate. You don't know what's going to happen 6, 12, 18 months down the road. So even if you weren't able to get full forgiveness, consider hanging on to that loan as a contingency fund. You can still pay it back 2 years from now if it turns out that you don't need it. But that's a really, it's a good way at 1% interest to have a little bit more flexibility for the uncertainty that we're going to face for nonprofit organizations.
That makes sense. But it's also clear that the only part of the loan that gets forgiven is payroll and other authorized expenses during that 8-week period.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you have more to present, or is it time to take questions?
Well, I did want to at least just touch on some of the other deliverables that we'll send, just so y'all can kind of understand what those things are. So when you get them, you're not left with a bunch of questions. So the next one that I'm going to list up here, this was put out by the SBA. These are just some frequently asked questions, and there are some things in there. Again, this is as of April 8th. I checked before this webinar. There aren't any new ones since then. There are some questions and answers in here that might help you as you're applying for your loan. So one question might be signatures from single individual is authorized. Who signs the application? So there's some questions in there. And the reason I include it is so y'all won't have to go hunting around for it. And then I also found another one that deals with Schedule C applicants in particular. This file has a lot of stuff that we're going to skip over. And so King, if you're going to look into this, I would recommend that you just skip right ahead to the bottom of page 4, where it starts talking about Schedule C and self-employed. So just there's some questions and some guidance there that can help you complete the form. And then the other thing that I was going to include for y'all would be, so our firm is a member of the AICPA, and the AICPA has worked really closely with the banking community and Congress to help put some clarity around this program. And this is a document that they put out where they're making recommendations to banks about the types of information they should be asking for. Okay, so every bank is going to be a little bit different, like I said before, but this is kind of the standard that the AICPA feels that banks should aspire to. And the reason I wanted to include that is just to kind of prepare y'all for maybe the types of information you might be asked for. So again, the more you can do on the front end is going to make the application go a lot smoother. I think some of the questions that came in, what if we don't have a banking relationship, what do we do? Well, showing up with a completed application with all of this information and being able to present that makes you a more attractive candidate, because you're coming across as I've gotten my information, I'm a highly informed applicant, I'm going to make this easy for you. Your banker is going to be a little bit more willing to work with someone like that than someone just saying, hey, I've heard about the PPP, what do I need to do? So again, just want to try to arm you with as much information as possible. So those will be kind of all the things that we'll include in the packet for y'all, and hopefully it's going to help cut through all the clutter and information that's out there and make things a little easier for y'all. So I think that's the presentation part. I think now we should use the remainder of our time to ask questions that y'all have. So there is a statutory deadline of June 30th. The projections are the money's not going to last to June 30th. Again, when I was answering Emily's question, when I was on the Small Business Administration website, I think they were already up to $248 billion out of 349. So, we're talking about maybe another week, maybe 2 weeks of funding left. So if you're getting together with your organization, talking to your board, the leadership team there, if you only have a few months of cushion there of operating reserves, I would encourage y'all to apply sooner rather than later. And if you get to the other side and you, for whatever reason, you don't feel comfortable keeping the money, you can give it back. But like Craig alluded to, there's going to be some future heartache, and you want to be as prepared as you can for those times.
Yeah, Alex, I would also add, having done one of these applications, I was a little intimidated by it. Small Business Administration, never worked with them before, federal government, scary. But compared to an average grant proposal, it's not bad at all as far as what you need to do and pull together.
That's good to know. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Again, it's that 2-page form plus whatever documentation your bank is going to ask you for. And again, it's going to be that payroll piece is what most of the documentation they're going to ask for.
I think I also heard in there some subtle encouragement to be patient and kind to your bankers, because they are covered up with applications right now. Right,
exactly. And so I think part of the things I wanted to talk, to convey to y'all, be patient, that just the sheer volume of applications that are coming in to these banks is overwhelming. A lot of them didn't have enough time to put adequate systems in place. They weren't ready on day one. They're still trying to work through that. First Citizens Bank, for example, didn't send that to me until Tuesday after. And people have been screaming like, wow, we need to apply. So, when you do contact your banker, have some patience. They are going to, I've given you a lot of good information here today. They're going to be the ones that are going to guide you through that process. So, Mike, we talked about maybe finding an online lender. If you can find someone locally, if you have a relationship with a bank, if you have a board member that has a relationship at a bank, start there because they're going to be your partner in this. They're going to help you make sure that your application is complete, that you have the supporting documentation necessary to be able to confidently say, yes, I provided it to the best of my ability. So kind of have that patience, be prepared. So hopefully what I've given you is enough to push y'all to the point of feeling confident to apply. And then, and then also plan. So as an organization, kind of plan how are we going to work through this immediate crisis, but then also thinking about the long term. So I think I had 3 P's there: patience, plan, and prepare, right?
Perfect. The closing thought that I would like to share is to please spread the word. Of those billions of dollars that have already been given out, those are predominantly going, it looks like, to very well established small businesses and nonprofits of 50 or 100 or 200 employees or more. Folks that are just ready to take advantage of programs like this right away. And what we're seeing is smaller nonprofits, sole proprietors, women-owned businesses, LGBTQ-owned businesses, rural organizations, and nonprofits right now are the ones getting left out, and those in many cases are the people and organizations that need the resources the most. So please spread the word that this application is not too bad, that nonprofits, small businesses, and small sole proprietors all do qualify, and this webinar will be available to watch online. So folks can come back to it later. So really encourage y'all to help spread the word.
Absolutely.
Slater, I'd like to thank you very, very much for your time this afternoon. Really appreciate your willingness to share your expertise with us and take our questions. Everybody, the best of luck to you in your applications. We'll be sending out some additional informational resources either today or tomorrow. And you are welcome to reach out to me if you have any additional questions.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank y'all very
Mike.
much, guys.
Good to see you all.
Y'all. There we go.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.